My name is Adrian. I'm 34 years old. If you had asked me just a few months ago, I would have told you my parents were devoted grandparents, the kind of people neighbors envy, always ready to babysit, always showing up with bags of toys and spoiling Emma with more candy than Sarah and I ever approved of. On the surface, it seemed ideal, the kind of arrangement young families dream about. But I've learned that sometimes the people you trust the most can hurt you in ways you never saw coming. My wife Sarah is 32, a nurse at the local hospital, the kind of woman who doesn't stop moving until her body forces her to. And then there's Emma, our 7-year-old daughter, who just celebrated her birthday with a unicorn-themed cake and insisted on wearing a tiara to bed for a week straight. She's the light of our lives, sharp, curious, and endlessly stubborn, which I suppose she gets from me. My parents, Robert and Linda, live just 20 minutes away in the house where I grew up. They've always been strict. Old school is the word I used whenever Sarah asked about my childhood. My brother Jake and I got spanked for talking back or sneaking out of chores. Never fists, never belts, just sharp smacks that left you stinging and resentful. At the time, I wouldn't have called it abuse. It was just the way things were. Still, I can remember the sound of the leather chair in Dad's study, the way it creaked when he leaned forward to call me in. Even now, that memory makes my stomach tighten. When Emma came along, I worried at first about how my parents would be with her, but they surprised me. They softened in their old age, or at least that's what I believed. Emma adored going to their house. They gave her ice cream before dinner, let her stay up late with movies, and called it making memories. Sarah and I tried not to fuss too much. It felt ungrateful to complain when we were getting so much help. Every Tuesday and Thursday, while Sarah and I worked, Emma stayed with them. It had been this way for 3 years without issue. If anything, Emma bragged about Grandma's cookies and Grandpa's magic tricks so much that I sometimes worried she preferred their house to ours. Last month, though, things shifted. Sarah had picked up a string of night shifts at the hospital. At the same time, I was drowning in a project at work, 12-hour days, barely sleeping. My parents offered to take Emma for the entire long weekend, so Sarah and I could focus. We'll take her to the zoo, my mom promised. She can help me bake cookies just like you used to. I remember that Friday evening so clearly. Emma had her backpack on, stuffed with pajamas, and her sketchbook. She hugged me tight before darting inside to show my dad a picture she'd drawn at school. My mom was already setting out sprinkles and chocolate chips for their baking marathon. Everything seemed so ordinary, and yet something tugged at me as I drove away. A whisper of unease I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the way my dad patted Emma on the head a little too firmly. Maybe it was the way my mom said, "Don't worry, we'll handle her," with that old steel in her voice. I shook it off, telling myself I was paranoid. They'd raised me, hadn't they? Surely Emma was safe. What I didn't know was that it would be the last carefree hug my daughter would give her grandparents. The trust I placed in them that night would fracture in ways I could never repair. Saturday night, I called after Emma's bedtime. The phone rang longer than usual, that sterile dial tone thinning into a silence that had weight to it. Mom finally picked up. Her voice had that too bright friendliness I recognized from childhood, like a smile pinned to a corkboard. "She's fine," she said. "A little mouthy at the zoo. You know how sugar is." I laughed small. "Too many churros." The sound was flat, a tired agreement that didn't quite land. I told her to respect the rules. "Okay, thanks. Tell her goodnight for me." "We already did bedtime. Don't call. It riles her up." A click. No goodnight back. I set the phone on the counter and stood there staring at the dark window above our sink. In the reflection, I looked like a man trying to convince himself that static is music. Sarah came in, rubbing her temples, the stethoscope still looped around her neck from habit. "She's okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, then added, "I think." Sarah leaned against me, and for a minute we were just two exhausted people, bodies folded into each other like origami, trying not to crease in the wrong place. I wanted to tell her about the off note in my mom's voice, how it vibrated against the old chord of my childhood, but the words didn't arrange themselves, so I kissed Sarah's hair instead and said, "Sleep. You've got nights." We slept like people who owed the world a debt. Sunday morning came scrubbed and bright, the kind of sun that makes you trust the day. At 11:03, my phone lit up with Mom. I answered on the first ring. "We need you to come pick up Emma immediately," she said. Formal. No good morning, no preamble. Why is she? She's been disrespectful and destructive. We can't handle it. Come now." "Mom, slow down. Is she hurt?" A pause. The kind with a shape. "She needs consequences," she said. And the word consequences rolled down my spine like a bead of cold water. "Please come." The line went dead. Sarah was still asleep from the overnight shift. I scribbled a note on the counter, going to my parents. I'll text, and grabbed the keys. On the drive, the world felt overexposed, the sky too blue, the asphalt shining like a blade. My parents' neighborhood was quiet in the Sunday way, sprinklers ticking a dog, thudding against a fence. The same oak trees that had watched me bike to school, now holding their breath. I parked and sat with the engine off, listening to it click as it cooled. The house was the same as always. Brick settled into the earth like a jaw set for an argument. Mom opened the door almost before I knocked, as if she'd been standing behind it with her hand on the knob. Her mouth was compressed into that line that had narrated my teenage years. "Where is she?" I asked. "In time out," Dad said from the kitchen, as if I'd asked where they kept the flour. He was seated at the table with his arms folded, glasses off, polishing them with the hem of his shirt in small annoyed circles. The room smelled like lemon cleaner, and something sharp beneath it, anger maybe, or metal. My eyes did that automatic sweep they've done since I became a parent. Is the stove off? Are there scissors within reach? Is there a 7-year-old in this frame? There wasn't. "What happened?" I said. Mom set a ceramic mug down with a careful clink. "She destroyed the bathroom." I blinked. "What?" "The guest bathroom," she said, and now the words tumbled out. Soap on the counter. Soap on the floor, and the dispenser. My dispenser dropped and shattered, and when we asked her, she claimed it was an accident. She slowed on accident like it was foreign currency. She needed to test between her teeth. "She's 7, I said. "She lied," Dad snapped. "She said it slipped. We saw the mess. She was playing in it." "She was making bubbles," Mom said tight, smearing it with her hands. We told her to stop, and she smirked. Smirked. The word strung itself between us like barbed wire. I could picture Emma earnest to a fault the way she over-explained when nervous. I could also see the powder keg, a child who believes the truth saves her, and 2 adults who believe the truth must kneel. "So you gave her a talking to?" I asked, hoping my voice was the good bridge between 2 cliffs. Dad's look found the crack in that bridge and stepped on it. We handled it, appropriately. Something in my stomach pitched. The room's light tilted suddenly mean. The clock on the wall hiccuped one loud tick. "What do you mean, appropriately?" Mom's shoulders lifted and fell, the sigh rehearsed. "Adrian, you know how we raised you. Children need to learn respect. There are lines." "Where is she?" I said again. My voice had sand in it. "In your old room," Dad said. "Thinking about what she did. Thinking about what she did." The phrase came with the smell of furniture polish and the thud of my own pulse in my ears from years ago. I started for the stairs. "Adrian, Mom warned." That warning that wasn't about safety, it was about order. "She's still in the middle of her consequence. If I go up there, I'll see my child," I said, and kept moving. The staircase was a tunnel of framed photographs, me in an awkward tux for prom. Jake with a busted lip and a triumphant grin from Little League Dad holding me upside down by my ankles while I shrieked with delighted terror. Each image felt like a witness I didn't ask for. At the top, the carpet it gave under my shoes, in the exact way it used to when I snuck back in after curfew. My old room's door was cracked open. The air inside was cooler, dimmer, as if the past had drawn the curtains. Toys long packed away were replaced by boxes labeled with dates and Mom's tidy handwriting. In the corner, small and stiff as a figurine, Emma faced the wall. "Sweetheart," I said, and my voice broke like thin glass. She turned. Her face was blotchy lashes, spiky with tears. When she saw me, the relief that washed over her was something I felt physically like a surge, like being yanked back from a cliff by the collar. "Daddy," she cried and ran. I knelt, arms open, and she collided with me so hard my shoulder jerked. She was shaking. I smoothed her hair back from her forehead, kissed her temple, and she clung like her bones had decided my ribs were scaffolding. "I didn't mean to," she gulped. "I dropped it, and it broke, and I said sorry, and Grandma said I was lying, and then—" Her words jammed. "It's okay," I said, though. Nothing felt okay. "It's okay. You're okay. We're going home." Behind me, the floor sighed my parents in the doorway, the house itself preparing to argue. Mom's arms were crossed high, her mouth arranged into concern. Dad's jaw was working that muscle, jumping like it wanted out. "Don't let her manipulate you with tears," Mom said gently, like she was sparing me from a scam. I stood up with Emma on my hip, that old primal arrangement child against parents' heart beating an answer. "We're leaving," I said. "Now." Dad stepped aside, not enough to be gracious, just enough to say he could have chosen otherwise. "Adrian," he said, and there was a tremor under the gravel of his voice. "She needed to learn there are consequences." What consequences? My tone was flat. I knew, but I asked it anyway, because some doors you make people open for themselves. A spanking, Mom said. A good firm one, the way we did with you and Jake. 10 with the paddle over the bed, and an hour in the corner. The words hung there unreal and heavy, like a chandelier cut free, but somehow suspended by memory. My body moved before my thoughts did, shielding Emma, turning my shoulder the old calculus of threat and angle I didn't know I remembered. I tasted metal. You hit my daughter with a wooden paddle, I said, each syllable a nail. For breaking a soap dispenser. For lying, Dad corrected. For talking back, Mom added. For disrespect. She's 7, I said again, because it felt like the only proof I had that the world was still the world. You don't lay hands on my kid. Ever. Dad's face rearranged itself into dignity, that mask he wore to parent-teacher conferences. If you won't discipline her, we will. That's what grandparents do support. Sarah says there are moments when the human voice can kill something. A bird's panic, a child's trust, all with a single tone. I heard my own voice then, and if it killed anything, it was a bridge. You will never touch her again, I said. You will never be alone with her again. We are leaving. Mom's eyes flashed wet, instant tears, weaponized tenderness. Don't be dramatic. You're making this worse. Worse than what you already did, I asked. Dad's nostrils flared. Don't you take that tone with your mother. There it was, the old script, the casting the cue. I pivoted away from it. I tightened my grip on Emma and walked. Down the hallway lined with our curated history. Down the stairs that knew the sound of my fleeing feet. Through a kitchen that smelled like citrus and war. At the threshold, Mom said my name like a spell, Adrian. I didn't look back. The sunlight outside was hard and corrective. My hands shook so badly I fumbled the car seat buckles twice. Emma sniffled, hiccuping air. Daddy, she whispered. Am I in trouble? No, I said, and my voice steadied right then like a string tuned at last. You are not in trouble. It was an accident. Her shoulders lowered a fraction. I closed her door and stood for a second, with my forehead against the car roof, metal warm from the sun. Breath sawtoothing in and out. Through the windshield, I could see the front of the house square and smug. The door still open a sliver, as if the house wanted to watch me drive away. I got in. The engine turned over. As I pulled away, I glimpsed my father in the window, arms folded, a judge satisfied. A sentence has been passed. My mother's silhouette appeared beside him, hand to her chest, the universal sign for, I'm the one who's hurt. On the ride home, Emma fell asleep, the hiccups smoothing out. At a red light, I reached back and rested my hand on her shin. She startled, then relaxed at the touch, and that tiny flinch made something inside me tear with a clean, merciless sound. We were 2 blocks from our house when I realized I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were bloodless. The skin along my palms felt scraped raw. I forced my fingers to loosen one by one like convincing someone to release a ledge. When we got home, the kitchen note I'd left for Sarah was still on the counter, the pen lying like evidence. The house, our house, looked exactly the same, coffee mugs, Emma's crayons scattered in a cheerful crime. But the air had shifted. Something invisible rearranged. A truss broken is a rearranged room. You don't always see what's missing. You just keep bumping into corners that used to be safe. I carried Emma to the bathroom, thinking only of washing the day off her skin, resetting the clock. I pulled down the back of her leggings and saw the first blooming purple edges where cloth met flesh. The rest of it, what I would find, what I would feel, weighted like a cliff beyond a blind turn. I froze when I saw the marks. Purple welts ran across Emma's thighs and lower back, ugly shapes that spoke louder than any explanation my parents could give. They weren't faint swats. They weren't fleeting reminders. They were bruises, the kind that lived in flesh for days, maybe weeks. Emma squirmed under my gaze, tugging her leggings back up as if ashamed. That broke me more than the bruises themselves, my little girl, thinking she'd done something to deserve this. Daddy, I'm sorry, she whispered, tears trembling at the corners of her eyes. I was just trying to make bubbles. I didn't mean to break it. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to storm back into that house and demand they look at the proof of what they'd done. But Emma's voice was fragile like glass. If I shattered now, she'd shatter with me. I knelt, cupping her face in my hands. Hey, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. It was an accident. You hear me? She nodded, but the doubt lingered in her eyes. When Sarah came home later that evening, exhausted from her shift, she found me sitting on the bathroom floor with Emma curled against my chest. My wife's eyes widened when she saw the bruises. She didn't speak at first. Her face went blank, her nurse's instincts colliding with her mother's rage. Then she covered her mouth with her hand and whispered, "Oh my God." I told her everything. The soap dispenser, the corner, the wooden paddle. Sarah's hands shook as she pulled Emma gently into her arms. She inspected every bruise, her jaw tightening with each discovery. By the time she finished, her eyes were bright with furious tears. "They beat her," she whispered. "They actually beat our daughter." I told them never again, I said, my voice low, almost a growl. I told them. Sarah straightened. "We're not handling this alone. I want her seen by a doctor. Tonight." We called our pediatrician, Dr. Martinez, who met us early Monday morning. She took photos, documented the injuries, her face stern but compassionate. "You did the right thing bringing her in," she said. "This has to be reported." And so the gears of the system began to turn. Child Protective Services got involved. The words sounded clinical official, but to me they felt like a rope thrown into storm water. We were grabbing hold, desperate for someone else to see what we saw. The call from CPS came the next day. An investigator wanted to speak with us and with Emma. They promised discretion, but made it clear this wasn't something we could sweep under the rug. When I called my parents to confront them again, the conversation exploded. "How dare you involve outsiders in family matters?" my mother spat. Her voice cracked, with a mixture of outrage and betrayal. "We raised you better than this. You're humiliating us." "You humiliated yourselves the second you laid hands on my daughter," I shot back. My father's voice thundered through the receiver. "You're ungrateful. We disciplined her the way we disciplined you and Jake. You turned out fine. Don't pretend you're some perfect father now." "Fine," I hissed. "I grew up terrified of you. I remember those paddlings, Dad. I just didn't realize how wrong they were until now, until I saw the marks on Emma. Do you have any idea what you've done to her?" "She's manipulating you with those tears," my mother cut in. "You're too soft, Adrian. That's the real problem. You're letting her get away with everything. She'll grow up spoiled and titled." I slammed the phone down before my rage turned into something worse. That night, Emma whimpered in her sleep, calling out for me. I sat beside her bed until morning, my hand resting on her small back, each rise and fall of her breathing anchoring me. I made a silent promise never again. No one, family or not, would ever make her feel unsafe. But even as I vowed protection, doubt slithered in. Was I overreacting? My parents' words echoed. "We raised you this way. You turned out fine." But the memory of the bruises, the look of fear in Emma's eyes drowned those doubts. The next morning, I texted my brother Jake, hoping for support. Instead, he called, his voice laced with irritation. "Mom and Dad are devastated," he said. "They told me everything. You're blowing this out of proportion, man. It was a spanking. That's it. You remember getting spanked." "This wasn't a spanking, Jake," I said coldly. "This was 10 strikes with a wooden paddle. Bruises. Purple welts. Do you understand?" He scoffed. "You're too sensitive. Kids need discipline. You're turning Emma into a brat. Mom and Dad are trying to help, and you're acting like they're criminals." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. If you can't see the difference between discipline and abuse, then you're blind. Jake's silence lingered for a second before he muttered, "You've changed, Adrian. You've forgotten what family loyalty means." Then he hung up. That word loyalty burned like acid. Was loyalty supposed to mean silence? Was it supposed to mean handing my daughter back to the people who hurt her, pretending it never happened? I looked at Emma playing quietly on the living room floor, her dolls lined up in neat rows. When I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, she flinched, so slight but unmistakable. That tiny movement told me everything. Whatever the cost, I couldn't let them near her again. The bruises lived longer than I expected. Every time Emma bent to pick up a toy or curled into the couch cushions, they flashed like cruel signatures on her skin. They were fading now, yellow at the edges, but they still screamed every time I looked at them. Dr. Martinez had done her job. Photos, documentation, a careful, practiced voice that was both reassuring and devastating. "This needs to be reported." Within hours, CPS called. Their tone was professional, but my stomach knotted as if I'd invited a storm into my home. The investigator visited the next day. Emma sat at the kitchen table with crayons spread like a rainbow. She was shy at first, ducking her head, but eventually she whispered about the soap dispenser and the paddle. The investigator's pen scratched steadily. When Emma's voice cracked, Sarah took her hand, squeezing until the tremor stopped. That night, when the house finally quieted, Sarah looked at me across the living room. Her eyes were dark hollows above her cheeks. "I can't believe this is our life now," she whispered. "I trusted them," I said. I actually trusted them. The guilt pressed down on me heavier than anger. I'd left Emma in their care. I'd told myself it was safe. CPS concluded quickly. Excessive discipline, they called it, but not criminal. One incident, no prior reports, no evidence of ongoing risk. The recommendation, counseling and parenting classes for my parents. When I told them this, Mom's voice went shrill. Counseling, parenting classes at our age. Do they think we're degenerates? They think you hit a child too hard, I snapped. Because you did. Dad's reply was a wall. We did what was necessary. We won't be treated like criminals. They refused the classes. They refused everything. Then the campaign began. Phone calls, text messages, long voicemails that swung wildly between tears and fury. One moment, Mom was begging me to forgive. The next, Dad was spitting that I was an ungrateful son. And then the family got involved. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my phone lit up like a switchboard. You're tearing this family apart. It was just a spanking. Do you want your daughter growing up without grandparents? Adrian, you're being vindictive. Some messages dripped with guilt. Others crackled with anger. One of my aunts said I was lucky to have parents who cared enough to discipline Emma. Another cousin accused me of weaponizing my child to punish my parents. The words cut, but what sliced deepest was Jake. He showed up at my door one evening, face tight, voice pitched for confrontation. They're devastated, Adrian. You've blown this way out of proportion. Out of proportion, I hissed. Jake, I saw the bruises. She couldn't sit comfortably for days. They spanked us too, he countered, arms flaring wide. You and I turned out fine. No, I said quietly. We turned out scared. You just don't see it. He shoved a hand through his hair. You're making Mom sick with stress. Dad can't sleep. Do you even care? They should have thought of that before laying a hand on Emma. Jake's glare lingered like a blade before he stormed off, muttering something about loyalty, about how I'd lost sight of what it meant. That word again, loyalty. It rang in my ears long after the door slammed. Sarah tried to anchor me, but I could see the toll on her too. Sleepless nights, tight shoulders. She told me I was doing the right thing, but I caught her staring at her phone sometimes, reading relatives' texts, jaw clenched, like she was swallowing poison. I lay awake most nights, Emma's breathing soft down the hall, Sarah shifting beside me. My mind spun through every argument, every accusation. Was I destroying my family? Was I teaching Emma that forgiveness had no place in love? But then I'd see again that moment in my old bedroom, Emma's tear-streaked face, the way she clung to me like a lifeline, and the questions evaporated. I couldn't unsee those bruises. I couldn't unknow that my parents had looked at a crying 7-year-old and decided she deserved pain. Family loyalty or not, that was a line. And they had crossed it. At first I thought maybe the storm would pass, that if I ignored the calls and texts long enough, the static would die out. But my parents didn't retreat. They adapted. The gifts started small. A box of cookies left on our porch, wrapped in Emma's favorite purple ribbon. Then a stuffed unicorn mailed directly to her with a card written in my mother's looping cursive, Grandma and Grandpa miss you so much. We love you even if Daddy is keeping us apart. Emma read it out loud at the kitchen table, her brow furrowed. Why would you keep me apart, Daddy? She asked, confusion dripping into her voice. My throat dried. Sarah snatched the card, ripped it in half, and tossed it into the trash, her jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. But the letters kept coming. Birthday cards, even though her birthday had passed. Notes tucked into envelopes with glitter stickers and promises. We'll see you soon, sweetheart. Families always find a way back together. It wasn't just the mail. They showed up. At Emma's soccer game, I spotted them at the fence, waving frantically. Emma saw them and started toward the sideline before I intercepted her. She looked up at me, tears swimming in her eyes. But it's Grandma. I carried her off the field while other parents stared. My father's voice boomed across the grass, calling me a thief. My mother cried, her hands pressed together like a prayer. At the grocery store, it happened again. Emma tugged at my sleeve, whispering, They're here. I turned and saw my mother at the end of the aisle, clutching a basket of oranges she had no intention of buying, her eyes locked on my daughter. The public scenes wore on me. Every time I felt like the villain dragging Emma away from people she loved. But I couldn't allow them to chip away at her boundaries with their tears and promises. After one too many ambushes, I drafted a letter, cold legal, printed in black ink. It stated that any further unwanted contact would be considered harassment, and I would seek a restraining order. I sent it certified mail. That stopped the ambushes, but it didn't stop the family. Family gatherings became interventions. At my cousin's wedding, the reception turned into a tribunal. My uncle cornered me by the bar. "You're making everyone miserable. Forgive them already." My grandmother gripped my hand so hard it hurt, begging me to stop tearing the family apart. At my uncle's birthday dinner, my parents arrived uninvited. They wept in the corner until the whole party revolved around their heartbreak. Sarah and I left early, humiliated. Days later, relatives texted us, "Your drama ruins everything. Maybe don't come next time." Isolation crept in like mold. One by one, invitations disappeared. Family group chats silenced. Photos of gatherings popped up online, everyone smiling except us. Sarah tried to be strong, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "It feels like we're pariahs," she whispered one night, "like we've been cut out." I wanted to tell her it didn't matter that Emma's safety came first, but in the quiet I admitted the truth. I missed them too. Not my parents, not the bruises, but the family barbecues, the laughter, the messy warmth of belonging. Jake didn't help. He cornered me in the parking lot at work, fury radiating off him. "You're destroying Mom and Dad," he said. "They're sick with worry." "They should be sick with guilt," I shot back. He grabbed my arm. "Don't be a child, Adrian. Fix this, or I'll fix it for you." I yanked free, but his words echoed like a threat. Later that week, he texted me, "If you don't reconcile, I'll help them file for grandparent visitation rights. The courts will listen to me if you won't." I stared at the message, bile rising in my throat. Was he bluffing? Could he really drag us into court force? Emma back into their arms. That night I barely slept. Every noise outside felt like someone watching. Every shadow stretched too long. My phone buzzed constantly, filled with cousins, aunts, uncles, all carrying the same message in different voices. "You're wrong. You're cruel. Fix this before it's too late." But whenever doubt slithered in, I remembered Emma's flinch, that tiny recoil when I brushed her hair back. The bruise-shaped truth burned back into focus. And I knew no matter how loud the family got, I couldn't let them rewrite what had happened. The letter arrived in an envelope with cartoon stickers plastered on the front, stars, hearts, a crooked rainbow. Emma found it first. She sat cross-legged on the rug, tearing it open with the excitement only a child feels for mail with her name on it. I was in the kitchen pouring coffee when I heard her voice, small and trembling. "Daddy, are Grandma and Grandpa going to die?" The mug slipped in my hand, scalding liquid splashing my wrist. I rushed to her. She was holding the letter like it was a piece of glass that might shatter further if she moved. Inside, in my mother's careful handwriting, "Dearest Emma, we are very sick. We may not have much time left. All we want is to see our precious granddaughter before it's too late. Please tell your daddy to let us say goodbye. Love forever, Grandma and Grandpa." Emma's lip quivered. "They're sick. They're dying." My heart clenched. I crouched and pulled her into my arms. "No, sweetheart. They're not dying. They just wrote something that isn't true. They wanted you to feel sorry so you'd ask me to take you to them." Her eyes widened with confusion. But why would they lie? I didn't know how to explain manipulation to a 7-year-old. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Because sometimes even grown-ups make bad choices, but you don't have to carry them." That night, Sarah read the letter herself. The fury that swept across her face scared me more than silence ever could. She shoved the paper back into the envelope and slapped it onto the counter like evidence in a courtroom. "This ends now," she said. "We're moving. I don't care if it means uprooting everything. I will not let them poison her with lies." I stared at her, tired, down to the marrow. "You're right," I admitted. "They won't stop. They'll just keep finding ways to crawl back in." So we started looking at houses 3 states away where I could work remotely, and Sarah could find shifts in a new hospital. We whispered about school districts and backyards. After Emma went to sleep, our voices low, like fugitives planning an escape. But secrets don't stay quiet in families like mine. When word leaked that we were planning to move, the reaction was nuclear. Calls exploded. "You're kidnapping her. You're running away like a coward. You're ripping the family apart." My father left a voicemail so long it filled 2 messages. His voice cracked at the end. "You'll regret this when we're in our graves." Jake was worse. He confronted me at work, cornering me in the parking lot. His voice was sharp, pitched to wound. "You think moving states is going to solve this? You're delusional. Mom and Dad have rights. Grandparent visitation is real. If you won't do what's right, the court will force you." I laughed bitterly, more a bark than anything human. You'd drag your niece into court to defend Mom and Dad beating her. She's over it by now, Jake snapped. You're the one keeping the wound open. You're traumatizing her more by cutting her off from family. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm again, hard enough to bruise. Man up, Adrian. Fix this, or I swear I'll make sure you lose. I shoved him off. Don't ever touch me again. He smirked that older brother smirk that used to sting when we were kids. You've gotten soft. You don't even know what family means anymore. That night, I found out Jake had been whispering at Emma's school, telling other parents Sarah and I were alienating her from loving grandparents. Emma's teacher even pulled me aside, asking if everything was okay at home. Shame crawled up my neck like fire ants. At home, Sarah sat at the table, her head in her hands. They're trying to destroy us, she whispered. Not just with Emma, but with everyone around us. The weight of it pressed on me. The loneliness. The exile. The whispers in grocery store aisles and the cold stares at soccer practice. Sometimes in the dead of night, doubt crept in. Maybe they were right. Maybe Emma would grow up resenting me for taking her grandparents away. Maybe I was overprotective, overreacting. But then, just as the doubt threatened to win, I'd see it again, the bruises. The way Emma flinched when voices rose. The way she whispered, I didn't mean to, Daddy. And the doubt would die in my throat. Because no matter what anyone said, I knew the truth. And the truth was enough to burn bridges forever. A week before we closed on the new house, an email from my mother landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple, please read Adrian. I hovered over it for a long time, my finger trembling on the mouse. When I finally opened it, the words bled manipulation from the first line. I've been reflecting. I know you are protective of Emma, and I respect that. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive an old woman who only wanted the best for her granddaughter. Paragraph after paragraph painted sacrifice and devotion. She reminded me of the countless nights she babysat so Sarah could rest the weekends they took Emma to give us freedom. She spoke of love like it was currency, like she'd already paid her dues. But buried in the middle one line revealed everything. We still believe Emma needed some form of correction for her behavior that day, but we are willing to discuss alternative discipline methods you find more acceptable. My chest tightened. Even here, in her so-called apology, she couldn't admit she was wrong. She still justified. The paddle still believed Emma deserved punishment for breaking a soap dispenser. It wasn't regret, it was negotiation. I closed the email without replying. That night, Sarah found me sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, the glow of my laptop screen long gone. She put her hand over mine. What did she say? Nothing new, I murmured. Nothing that matters. Sarah studied me for a long time. Then we're really leaving this behind. I nodded. The decision was made. The day we told Emma we were moving, I expected tears. Instead, her eyes lit up. Do I get a new room? She asked. Your very own, Sarah smiled. And a backyard big enough for a swing set. Emma clapped her hands. Can I paint my walls purple? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Any color you want. Her excitement was a balm. To her, this wasn't exile, it was adventure, a chance to start fresh. But for me, the goodbyes weren't easy. Driving through town every corner, whispered of my childhood bike rides with Jake, the smell of Mom's cooking on summer evenings, Dad teaching me to throw a baseball in the yard. Those memories tangled with the present until I no longer knew who my parents really were. The people who raised me with stern love had become strangers who bruised my daughter and called it discipline. On our last night in the old house, I stood by Emma's bed as she slept. Her breathing was steady, her face untroubled. I thought of the day I found her in my childhood room facing the wall, her cheeks wet with tears. That memory would never leave me. It was carved into me like a scar. I bent down and whispered, "You're safe now, I promise." The moving truck arrived at dawn. Neighbors waved, offering polite smiles, unaware of the battlefield that had raged behind closed doors. My phone buzzed with one last text from Jake. You're dead to me until you fix this. Mom and Dad are heartbroken, and it's all your fault. I deleted it without answering. As we drove out of town, the morning sun rising behind us, Sarah reached for my hand. Emma was in the back seat, humming softly to herself, her tiara tilted on her head like a crown. I looked at her through the rearview mirror and felt something inside me settle. I could live without parents. I could live without cousins, uncles, weddings, birthdays, barbecues. But I could not live with the thought that I had failed to protect her. That was the trade-off. Family or safety. And when the scales tipped, there was no question where my loyalty belonged. Daddy Emma's voice rose from the back seat. When we get there, can we plant a tree in the yard? Of course, I said, my throat tight. We'll plant as many as you want. As the road stretched ahead, I understood the truth in its rawest form. Sometimes protecting your child means burning the bridges behind you. And though the fire would consume everything I once called family, I knew I could live with that. Because Emma would grow up safe. And that was enough.